This is a recording of the KC Secular AA speaker meeting held every Saturday night at HJ's Youth and Community Center, 6425 Warnell Road, Kansas City, Missouri. This is episode 20, and our speaker is John S.
Welcome to the Secular Speaker Meeting. I'm Simon, and I'm an alcoholic. I've asked Courtney to read the preamble.
AA is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover. We have no dues or fees for membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others achieve sobriety.
Our secular group attempts to maintain a tradition of free expression and to conduct a meeting where all may feel free to express any doubts or disbeliefs that they may have and to share their own personal form of spiritual experience or search for to the rejection of it. Keeping with AA tradition, we do not endorse nor oppose any form of religion or atheism. Our only wish is to help those who want recovery without having to accept anyone else's beliefs or having to deny their own. You guys know the gig, how this works. Recognizing a period of sobriety. Okay. If you want to listen to the past podcasts, they're at secularaaspeaker.org, or you can look them up on whatever podcast service you use. But I think you search for Secular Speaker Meeting AA Kansas City or something like that.
I think it's
Secular AA Speaker Meeting Kansas City.
Yeah, that's my bad. Mm-hmm. Easy to find.
John, if you want to take it over.
Okay. You know, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. And I think I know how people feel so uncomfortable because I'm looking at this thing. I'm like kind of getting like double vision or something. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's better, I guess. Anyway, so Simon last week said that he didn't have anyone to talk. So I said, I'll talk. So why not? So I've been sober for 30 years. So I got to be kind of careful because I could take up a lot of time if I go into a lot of detail. So I'm just going to kind of just go a little bit about, I think I'm going to talk about my background, a little bit about my drinking, what got me into AA, and then some of where I'm at today, I guess. So just to kind of give you a little bit about my background, I was born in 1962, but I'm not going to start the story there. But that's to give you some context, I guess. And my mother and father were both born and raised in the same little town in Florida, New Smyrna Beach. And my father was career military. So we moved around a lot. It was really important for us to be polite, have good manners, and how appearances were important, I guess. My childhood, I guess, was a mixed bag. I would describe it as good. I was a pretty happy kid, I guess. But, nothing's black and white. My father could at times be just really violent and angry. And when he disciplined us, which was often, that would come out. I could really relate to another speaker here who said that she used to, as a kid, want to be invisible. That's how I was. I was terrified of my father. And when he would come home, I remember just panicking when I would just hear the sound of the door close. I knew he was home. My mother suffered from depression, and so she was taking antidepressants and different types of medication. And back then, the medications weren't really good, and they put her to sleep. So she spent a lot of time in her bedroom sleeping. And so that's one side of them. The other side of them, though, is that they could be fun and loving. And, when we lived overseas, we used to go on these camping trips in the summer to all these different countries, and we had a great time, So there was, I know now that part of what I was dealing with as a child was that uncertainty and that instability of never knowing, am I going to have the happy dad or the mean dad? Am I going to have the loving, caring mom, or am I going to have the mom that belittles me and that kind of thing? So I didn't know how to deal with that as a kid. I didn't even know what it was, how to identify it. But there was something amiss. There was something that made me question myself, and something wrong with me. When I was I think it was Thanksgiving dinner 1970, so I'm like 8 years old. My mother let me have a glass of wine, and she wanted me to learn to drink like a gentleman. And I remember that drink. I mean, there's a few drinks in my life that I remember, and that is one, because it changed the way I felt. And I didn't really internalize it or understand what was going on, but it was medicine for me. And from then on, I sought it out. My parents used to have these parties, these really big parties. And as a little kid, in the morning, I'd go down and I would drink the leftover drinks, the gin, the whiskey, the beer, whatever it was. It's kind of gross. But and I wasn't even thinking about why I was doing this, but, it changed the way I felt. But I got drunk for the first time when I was 10. So, boy, this stuff really kind of pretty young in my life. But I would just happen to pass by a bottle of liqueur in our house, and I decided to take a shot. And then I had another shot and another shot, and another shot, and I got drunk. And when my parents saw me, they just thought it was funny, and they couldn't believe it. They laughed. And I didn't think it was so funny the next day. I was so sick, and I felt bad about myself for having done that. I couldn't go to school, and I was just so sick, and just thinking that there was that I screwed up, and I swore I'd never drink again, and I didn't until high school. About 15 years old, and then I had this type of experience that I think most people do in high school, where you drink with your friends and so forth. And now this is the 1970s, and I think it was a more permissive era, especially when it came to alcohol, and that not just permissive with my own parents, my own family, but the community at large. So like, my parents didn't mind if I drank as long as I wasn't doing pot or drugs. They were fine with that. So it was no big deal for me to go out with my friends and drink. Even take booze from their house was not a big deal. When we were driving around the town, listening to music and drinking in the car, if the cops ever pulled us over, we just had to pour out the beer and then go on home. So this is just the way it was. We lived in Leavenworth, Kansas at the time, and there were bars. At that time they had 18-year-old bars and they had 21-year-old bars. But the 18-year-old bars would let us in when we were 15, 16, 17 years old, So it was like, it was a real kind of a permissive era. So I didn't really have any consequences to deal with for my drinking when I was in high school. I do think that my drinking might have been a little bit different. And I think how it affected me at that time is I would drink to, I think, help me feel more comfortable with people. But looking back on it, I know what it was actually doing is it was driving me away from people, because I could never really drink without getting drunk. So there might have been a period during the evening when I'm actually thinking I'm fun and talking to people or whatever, but I get to a certain point where I'm off on my own doing something, who knows what. So that was like in high school. But the first time I thought I needed help, I was 19 years old. And what was going on, I was in college. This is now 1980, 1981. I was at KU. And I lived in a fraternity. And so there was a lot of drinking going on. But it was really affecting my life, my grades, not being able to go to class. My friends, the people in the fraternity house, they didn't even like the way I drank. There were some times at parties, they would actually lock me up in my room and not let me go to the party. It was just it wasn't good. And I think that even the fraternity guys, they would laugh and make jokes. And I think maybe I would laugh on one level, but inside I felt bad about it. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And I was reading the Lawrence Journal World, and they had an advertisement for AA, and I thought I would go. but I told myself I was too young. I thought it was ridiculous. I'm just too young to be an alcoholic. I'm too young. So I did not seek help at that time, and I just continued drinking. And so what happened is I flunked out. I flunked out of school, and I went home to live with my parents. So now this is the 1980s. I'm in my getting a 20-year-old age, getting to be 21 years old, and my life was all messed up. But I didn't really think it was. I didn't really connect it to alcohol per se. I just thought I was messed up, and I was looking for an answer. I didn't grow up in any kind of religion at all. We never went to church or anything. I knew nothing about it. But for some reason, I thought that there was an answer for me in religion. Now, at the time, televangelism was really popular. They had all these big-time televangelists, Jim Bakker, Pat Robertson. They were all on TV. So I started listening to these guys. I'm still drinking. I'm reading the Bible. I even took a class to learn about religion because I knew absolutely nothing about it. And I tried to believe, and I remember one of the preachers on the television, he would say that God would answer your prayers if you believed. It's only a matter of belief. That's all there is to it, right? So I remembered that. Well, one night, my father called me down, and he said there was something wrong with my mother. Now, I knew that there was because I had passed by her room that night and I was talking to her about something, and she was very, very groggy and not with it. But that wasn't entirely unusual either. But he called me down and said, something's wrong with your mother. And he called an ambulance. And what was going on is she had taken an overdose intentionally. It was a suicide. Yeah. And so when the paramedics got there and they were working on her, I was praying the way that I remember that guy told me to pray, where if you really, really believed. And anyway, she died. And so I that was it. I'm not going to pray. No more praying for me until I got to AA 5 years later. But that was it for me. Now my drinking really progressed from there. And I don't know if it was simply because of that situation or but basically I moved out of the house. I tried to go back to school again, but I just left school without withdrawing. I ended up getting all Fs. And I got these jobs, these labor jobs, working in restaurants, stuff like that. And I drank a lot, but the consequences for my drinking were getting more serious. I started finding myself getting arrested. My life was just kind of a mess. If the police ever gave me a ticket for anything, I would never pay it. And so anytime they gave me a ticket, it was always a big deal. I'd always have to go to jail, because there was a warrant for me because some other stupid thing I didn't do. But then I started getting DWIs. I was a blackout drinker. I didn't drink by myself. I always went out to bars. And I think part of it was that I wanted it to be a normal thing. I thought if I was at home drinking, and I thought it was just normal to go out and have a few. It was crazy because I'd tell myself, I'm just going to have a few. And I never really did. I always shut the bars down. And I'd black out. And so anyway, I started getting DUIs. I got 3 of them. Each one was almost about a year apart. And so on my last one, I was 25 years old, and that last one that I had cost me everything that I had at the time. I ended up losing my job when they found out about it because the job I had to drive their cars, and they told me, they knew about my 2 previous DUIs. They told me if I got another one, that would be it. So I lost my job, lost my apartment eventually, and I was really terrified of what had become of my life. And I really wanted to die, but I just couldn't kill myself. So that's what got me into AA. And I went to that first meeting, and the people were sharing their stories with me and everything. And they were all older than I was, but the thing that got me about their stories was not necessarily the events in their lives or anything like that, but how they felt about their drinking is what I could relate to more than anything else. And they spoke in a way that it was past tense, their drinking, and their problems were not what they were dealing with today. And they were it was downtown, and at the time, when people would go to work, they actually dressed nice and everything, and so they all looked great. They all had their lives together, and I don't know. I just thought, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. Now, that first meeting, they did close with the Lord's Prayer, so that was my first time praying since my mother's death, and I didn't like it. I felt weird. I never really liked it, but I just kind of went along. I was pretty desperate to do something about this. So I went to a lot of AA meetings. Eventually, I went to a group called P3, which was an all men's group. It was just suggested I go there. And I thought it was weird at first that it was all men, but it was kind of good for me too, because there were a lot of guys there that were my age, whereas at the other group, there really weren't. So there were a lot of us like in our 20s and our 30s. And so I had these friends I'd run around with and we do things with together all the time. And so for like the first 10 years of my sobriety, I really spent going to a lot of meetings and stuff. I got a sponsor, and at this particular group, they were really big into the big book. And so the thing was, you would get with a sponsor, you'd study the big book, you'd like read a chapter every single day for 30 days, you'd get together. It was ridiculous. I mean, I got to the point where I had the damn book almost memorized, and the thing is, though, is what happened, and I'm not going to say that this was all bad because my life was getting better and I was staying sober and everything, but what really happened to me during that time is I was learning the language of AA. I knew what to say in these meetings to make the heads go up and down like, you've got it together, kid. You're great. Good for you, And whatever. I don't even know if I was intentionally doing it, but that's the deal, So I was getting the good vibes from people and I was staying sober and life was getting better and that was great. Well, I did this for about 10 years and then my father died unexpectedly. So I'm like 35 years old and been sober for 10 years. He dies. He just got some kind of a weird virus, went to the hospital and was dead like within 3 days. And that event caused me to kind of re-examine where I was in my life because my father had achieved a lot, and I hadn't really. Even at 35 years old, I'd never been married. I'd never owned my own home. I never really made very much money. I'd never, finished school. So I decided I was going to get all these things done. So my life really changed a lot. It was less centered on AA and more focused outside of AA. And I went to school at UMKC, which turned out to be a really good thing for me. And it wasn't necessarily the things that I learned there, but I learned how to think critically. And I started questioning all these things that I used to say in AA. And little by little, I started realizing that I started learning about facts, and facts meant a lot to me, and how to get facts and how to use them, I guess. And so I started really questioning AA a lot, but I kind of kept that to myself. I stopped the praying. In AA, they always in those days I'd always start my day on my knees, believe it or not, praying. But I stopped all that, but I didn't tell people I stopped it. But so that was it. But I achieved a lot during this time. I got married. I finished school. I got better jobs. Things were going good. Then about 2012, whatever, 10, I start reading some books, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, about atheism. And I realized I'm an atheist. And it scared the shit out of me because I didn't think I would be welcomed in AA. I thought, what am I going to do? I've been doing AA all my life. And so the first thing I did, I went to the big book and I tried to make sense of it. And I found it was quite easy, actually, because when I would read that book, and I always knew this, everything in there was really pretty practical. And it was only like you'd read this paragraph of something that they did, and then at the end they had attributed it all to God or whatever. Well, I just crossed out that God stuff, and underneath that was the practical stuff that we would do. And so I was very comfortable with this. So I'd share this in my group in meetings. And I started getting some pushback. And I started feeling uncomfortable there. I felt like I was walking in eggshells around these guys that I've known for 25 years. Sometimes I would get like really courageous and I would just say that something is just dead wrong, And the one time that I realized that I needed a divorce, I guess, was we had this meeting about how sometime the time will come where there's absolutely no human power is going to help you. Only God can help you. That's the gist of the meeting, right? And everybody's talking about only God is going to help you in this time. I said, no, well, that's not true. I said, because there is no God, that's never going to happen. There's always been people around that have helped me. Well, the people went crazy, on that ship. So I said, anyway, so I did some research and I found out, they've had these agnostic groups going on for 25 years. Not 25 years, since 1975, they've had agnostic groups. They didn't have any in Kansas City, but they started in Chicago, and then they had them in California, they had them in New York, they had a number of them. And so eventually I thought that maybe we could start one here in Kansas City. So I got with my friend Jim, who you know, and he was like the only person I knew that was open atheist. And I asked him if he'd like to start a group for agnostics and atheists, and we did. We started the We Agnostics Group. And we, at that time, were meeting every Thursday night. And the group really took off pretty quickly. I mean, you were one of the first people. But there was never a time when it was just me and Jim sitting by ourselves, maybe one time. And there was never, ever a time where I was just there by myself. There was always 4 or 5 people. And then it got to be where, 10 people. And now, we have 15 or 20 people at most of our meetings. And we meet, often. And there's now 3 of these secular groups now, this one, the Free Thinkers Group, and We Agnostics, and there's meetings all the time. And that's really incredible for a city our size to have that. I mean, there's a lot of Midwestern cities comparable to Kansas City that don't have anything like that. But this was a really good experience for me because I'm once again comfortable in AA, but I'm more connected to AA than I was before. It means more to me now. I just can't tell you how much it means to me to go to meetings and watch people get better and get some benefit out of it. There were a lot of people in the early days that would come to the meetings that either had a bad experience with AA and stayed away until they heard about our group, or there were people that didn't think they would ever want anything to do with AA, but until they heard about our group. So that kind of brings me to where we're at now. And I just thought I would talk a little bit about my feelings now about AA, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the steps, and the secular AA meetings. And I'll just be real quick about that. But first of all, when it comes to the steps, they were a real big deal for me for a long time. And I was pretty uptight about it, thinking they had to be done just so. I've really evolved a lot. I'm very relaxed about them. When I think about them, all they really are is the experience of these people back in the 1930s, the original steps, the way they're written. That's all they were. They were just people that were trying to explain the experience as they understood it. Now, their experience happened to be a religious one, so all the language came out in a religious way. But they were just explaining an experience that happened. They didn't really mean or intend for people 80 years into the future to replicate what they were doing and to have the very same experience. But a lot of people kind of pick up on that and they think, oh no, we got to do it that way. It's not that way at all. And basically, what I believe is that these steps are just an expression of an experience. And it's the experience kind of happens organically and naturally when people gather together and help and support each other to stay sober. And when you think about it, like that first step is just admitting that I have a problem, and just coming to an AA meeting is that, why would I come if I didn't think I had a problem? And the second step is just believing that there's some hope for me, and that hope for me might be coming to these meetings. And that third step is a decision or a commitment to keep to this new way of life, to not drink and to move forward. When we go to these meetings, we share with each other in an honest way about our past lives, about our current lives. We share that with other people. That's steps 4 and 5. And then we throughout our lives, our daily lives, we try to make this commitment to get better. We take it out into the world. We mend our relationships with people. This is all stuff that we just do. Now, if we were to write it out in our own language today, we would probably write it out different than those guys in the 1930s. But that's basically the experience that we're having. Now, there's books you can get and stuff, and you can read, and you can really delve into these and more deeper if you want to. But essentially, I think it's just an organic process that happens. So I'm very relaxed with it. I also don't think that it's the cure. I think it's just a way that it's just a way that's a nice way to kind of get our lives back together, So there's a lot of people that kind of I've seen in my years in AA that have beaten themselves up. And I was one of them that thought, oh, I'm just not doing this the right way. And that's why I'm miserable. And that's not the way it should be. And as far as these secular meetings go, sometimes I hear people talk about them as if they're something different from AA. Sometimes I hear that people talk about AA as if it's something not us. And that's not true at all. We are an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and just as any other meeting is. The only difference is we don't pray. Some people say we don't talk about the steps very much. Well, most groups don't really, unless it's a meeting specifically devoted to the steps. So, and if you go to our meetings and you hear people talk, if you know enough about those things, they're all in that conversation anyway. So anyway, that's enough of that. So, yeah, I have to say that things are good. I've been married now for a long time, since 2006, 13 years. I have a stable life. I have a good job. I don't have to worry about money. I have good friends. I have enough that keeps me engaged and happy and interested in life. I enjoy, I like reading. I'm still very much into AA. I still read a lot about the steps and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's all I have. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you, John. I know I've said this to you before, but all the work that you put into what we do here in Kansas City anyway has changed my life and my father's life to a certain extent. We don't see him a lot anymore, but I know you were quite special.
And that's another thing that I've learned. People don't have to go to AA for the rest of their lives. A lot of people just go for a little while and move on. They're fine.
Yeah, he's still sober and happy, and he doesn't go to AA.
A lot of people say, oh, God, he's not going to meetings. He must be all fucked up. And that's not true.
Yeah. I do. I think he really would enjoy going to meetings still.
Yeah.
Just doesn't fit in his schedule or lifestyle.
Yeah.
But anyway, I really appreciate the groundwork that you laid for us here. And like you said, on top of enjoying the meetings, I do feel like just participating and being here for those folks who don't feel comfortable going to AA for any particular reason and do feel comfortable coming to our meetings just makes me feel proud to be there, I guess. I was really relieved when I found out there was a alternative version, I suppose. I'm going to pass the mic on to Greg here. And
Thanks, Simon.
Go on.
I'm Greg. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Greg.
Oh, John, I love a humble man, but you've done so much for so many people, and you didn't even talk about the podcast and how you got into that and how many thousands of people that you're touching. And it's not just because you're doing it, but it's how you do it. You do it with such a clean, pure way when you do it, and you make room for the people who are speaking. So,
I try not to be too much of an egomaniac,
Well, it's working because I can usually smell one, and you don't have any smell. So,
well, that whole podcast thing is weird. I never really thought about I was going to ever do a podcast, but I really do enjoy it. I've had an experience with meeting people I never would have met from countries all over the world, all kinds of different experiences. I get to read books and talk to people who've written the books. It's really bizarre to think about, wow, this is me doing this. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
But it's fun. And now we have a meeting now. This meeting here is a podcast. How about that?
Yes. Well, yeah. I was one of the first people to come, thanks to Brent. We met each other in treatment. And as you remember, and you may not remember, but I was in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out and in the hospital, out of the hospital, back ready to go, and then fall again. And no one ever said I'm a jerk or I'm bad or anything. There was no punitive. And I think we've kept that all the way through. I don't think anyone, if people are ashamed of what they've been doing, it's because they're carrying that shame. It's not because we're instilling it, which isn't always the case. So this is a very, very special thing to me. And largely you and Jim were the two founders. I'm glad I was able to meet you back then, and appreciate you very much, very much. I do. So.
Thanks, Greg.
Hi, my name is Courtney. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey there, Courtney.
And thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate it. I was excited to be here tonight to hear it. I appreciate the part where you talked about your childhood and when you started drinking. And so one of the reasons that I like coming here is because I think I've told you this, Kana. I grew up but right behind this white church in 19 West 65th Terrace, so a house right down the street. I can almost see it from here.
Wow.
Yeah, and I used to come here when it was the Y. So I used to come swing here, and there was a pool. But I started, the first part that resonated with me is talking about how you wished you were invisible. I did with my mother. Was pretty abusive, but just very beautiful and cunning and smart. And I used to stand in front of her, and she would say those horrible things to me. And I used to look at her and think, I wish that right now I could melt and I could be the grout in the tile that I'm standing on. And I wish I was a grout. And I just remember thinking that. And that brought me to, I started drinking when I was 9 because my parents got divorced, and my mom became a pharmaceutical sales rep, and then she kicked ass. I mean, she's ambitious, and she figured things out, and we stayed in this house over there, and we had a nice life. And she hired a nanny, and our nanny watched myself and my brother and sister, who are 5 and 6 years younger than me, and I liked her a lot. And my nanny was the first one that gave me alcohol. And she did it because she used to invite me over to her house, and she would give me alcohol so that her husband could molest me. And she would ask me, well, what would you like, Courtney? And I would say, well, I think I'd like some Bartles and James wine coolers. And that is the reason that I am thankful for alcohol, because I do not remember any of it. I just know that I would get up the next day and I was so sick. Like, I would throw up like you did. And my dad came to pick me up. Like, it was like the last time it happened, because the last time it happened, and I don't know what happened, was that I remember her husband coming in till I would stay in the guest room, and he would come in, and I'm pretty feisty. So I must not have had that much to drink that night. And mind you, I'm 9, 10 years old. And he sat in the bed next to me, and I don't know, I guess he was going to do something. And I reached up and grabbed his arm, and I cut my face. I have this scar from I have really strong fingernails. And so I cut, and I remember the next day getting up and having this, and he backed off, and that was the last time. And I don't know. I appreciate you talking about that, just because I'm thankful for alcohol because I cannot remember. But then again, I know something happened to me. And so when I sit here, I look down the road and I think, I wonder what did happen to me. I'm glad it stopped. And I wonder how that, how they say that if you start drinking, the earlier you start drinking, the worse it's going to be for you as far as being an alcoholic. And both my parents are alcoholics. So, I mean, like I've said before, I cannot think of anyone in my family that is not an alcoholic. So I just am kind of processing that. And I don't know. I've kind of always pushed it aside and not really thought about it. And I didn't really feel sorry for myself or oh my gosh, I was molested. I've never really been like that, but I know that it happened and it definitely affects me. So I'm hoping that through this process and hearing everybody else's stories that I'll be able to kind of figure that out. And with that, I'll pass. So thank you.
It's so nice to see you come to our meetings.
Thanks.
Yes. I'm Kana, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Kana.
Thank you for sharing your story. I think I've heard parts of it before, but it's really nice to hear your story. And you said towards the end that about the steps, you think that people as you're recovering, you kind of automatically go through these things. And I agree. I was talking to my sponsor. I think she said a couple weeks ago that she thinks that that's how it is too. And I can kind of see that a lot. I've been working the steps kind of intentionally, but it does seem kind of like a thing that kind of happens naturally, and it makes sense to not kind of overemphasize it or, be too strident about it. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Kana.
One thing I used to always hear at meetings is Step 4 is going to make you drink. Fuck that.
Yeah.
I don't know. So many preconceived notions of failure already put in place as soon as you walk in the door. Sorry, that was a bit.
No, it's
that
true.
Was, that was
it's true.
an aside.
I've been to so many meetings where people blame their relapse because they didn't do their 5th step the right way, or they didn't make amends, or some bullshit like that. It's like, no, come on.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the part of the stuff, I guess, is I've never really read them. I don't know. I whenever I feel like doing them, I guess I will. But anyhow, what is this whole part where you make amends? I don't know. I can only think of right now the people that I would like that needs to tell me they're sorry. So I know that that's like part of it, but like I'm not really looking forward to that because.
Well, that's why a lot of people don't like work with steps. I feel like some people might say that if you feel like a lot of people need to apologize, that might be your resentments kind of towards people. And I think it's only understandable. I mean, a lot of people in life have people who've done them wrong or things that have happened to them that they kind of, it's hard, it's hard to kind of know how to handle things. But like, I mean, when I was talking with my sponsor, who I think is the same as yours, but yeah, and so she was saying that like it seemed like the person who I really harmed the most like was me.
Yeah.
And so I guess I might end up making amends to me somehow, but I kind of
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm not there yet. That's like 8th step. They say the steps are in order for a reason or whatever. But like, I don't. That's down the road. And so I mean, I'm one of the ones that I'm supposed to be ready to be rid of my defects of character, which is I don't know what that involves, but.
Why don't you buy yourself something really nice?
Well, I probably will.
Yeah, I would say on those amends steps, those are the ones that are best to be just not to even do if there's like any sort of a doubt. I remember one time I was answering the phones for central office, Kansas City central office, and it was a woman calling. And she's not in AA, she's not an alcoholic, but she was really, really upset because her ex-boyfriend, who she had a restraining order against and everything like that, was calling her or emailing her to try to make amends. And she says, she was just tormented that this guy, was contacting her. And she said, why do you do this? And I said, you know what? He should not be doing that. He should not be doing that at all. Because it does say in there, except when to do so would injure them or others. And that includes ourselves. And I think there's also a really big difference between men and women. I think a lot of women have been victimized, and they might not. They have not been in that situation where they have to go around making amends. These things were written in the 1930s by a bunch of guys that were businessmen and stuff like that. And I was pretty young too, most of my amends were just like probably to my dad. And it was not like anything else than not getting arrested and being a drunken asshole anymore, basically, And I could actually be part of the family again. And that was really my amends more than anything else. But yeah, I agree with that. It's really difficult stuff, these things, because there's some deep stuff that we have to deal with in our lives. And sometimes it's best to, I got a lot of professional help. I got counseling. I went to see counselors and stuff like that. So
I believe that there's several things written into the steps that just kind of lay groundwork to get the things in your head that bother you out. Mm-hmm. Whatever made you drink before. And I think a lot of people are able to think of others in their life and stir up strong emotions. However, need to deal with that, you can, but it seems pretty common that you might have a problem with somebody else that's close to you in your life. I think that's kind of what it's there for.
I come from a really like violent family where violence is accepted. And I've always been kind of proud of it. And so if I don't like something, even though I've had great, I'm like, well, I'll just fucking hit them, or I will do something evil. And I don't feel bad about it. So if I know that's not appropriate, and like I'm 41 years old, and so I can't just go running around strangling people, when I don't like what they say, and it becomes a problem. So anyhow, for the first time today, I felt a flash of anger at the meeting, at the 12 o'clock meeting, towards someone that was in the meeting. And I thought to myself, well, I'd like to just go over there and put my hands around her neck and bash her head into the floor. But I know I cannot do that. But it has really like stuck with me all day. And I thought, so I wanted to know how do you handle when someone comes into the meeting and says something hateful? And I mean, I'm not going to go and assault her, but I would like to. So, I mean, so I'm just wondering, how do you handle that when people come in and they're horrible? What do you do? I would like to tell her, but I mean, I don't want to say, I'm not going to, like I said, do anything, but I want to know, like, how do you handle that?
Yeah. One thing I believe that people who say they've never been to a bad AA meeting haven't been to enough AA meetings. There's always going to be a crazy meeting. I think every kind of crazy thing I've ever heard, it's, I don't know the best way to deal with it. It's just, sometimes I'm the same way. I just cringe, and I just, please stop. It is after 30 years of this shit. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's good just to laugh about it, I guess. But yeah, and people too, that's just where that person is at this point, and they might be a completely different person a year from now or a month from now. That's another thing too. And I hear a lot of people sometimes, will say something, and they might believe that to be true today, but, talk to them 6 months from now, it's completely different. So
when somebody throws out something like that, but I always, because when I was little, I was very shy, but very feisty and I know that feeling. And I think they don't mean to put it in my heart. It's in their heart. And they're living with that, and I'm just witnessing it. Even if they aim it at me, it's really not what I would perceive it to be when I would let that adrenaline catch me and take me away. So we're in a position to see so many people, listen to so many people, all different levels of what they can express. And people are harboring a lot of shit, and sometimes it just has to come out at a meeting, but it's not meant for me. And if I take it, it's kind of my problem then, and I don't want it to be my problem. So
I think also, like, when I first started going to meetings, it was this very positive experience, like, almost entirely. And so whenever anything negative would happen, it was like amplified. And it's just like, it seems like it's supposed to be this safe place. And it's just like, there aren't supposed to be these problems between people or whatever, but it happens. It's like anywhere. And I think over time, like, I know I've gotten a lot better at kind of not being as affected by it. But, you kind of have to get your legs under you and kind of get used to dealing. We deal with a lot of the same people, and you get kind of used to them, and you kind of like know how to deal with it and just not kind of let it in kind of over time. But yeah.
Some days are worse than others.
That's true. Yeah.
That serenity prayer, one of those things I found that I can't control is pretty much anything anybody else does or thinks or says. Gotta let them do it.
You can't even really control how you feel about it either
sometimes you can't, but I actually kind of get a kick out of meetings that get real wild. Just because it's something
chaos breaks out.
Yeah. It wasn't wild, though. Nasty comments. Yeah.
I thought, I want to go. I was like, oh, I can't do that.
You can.
Well,
it was very quiet.
Yeah. Well.
Just like I he was just rude. It was just unkind. It's not like what Wes says. It's a kind and necessary place.
Yeah.
It made him true, but it was.
Yeah, it wasn't really necessary. Yeah.
It's just like defeating and just.
We can discuss it.
Well, she'll be listening she'll listen to this episode. She'll know who she is.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you
for today and everything else.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Good job.